What's up, friends? Welcome into our weekly members Q&A, one of my favorite things that we do every single week. Thanks so much for being here. More importantly, thank you so much for being a member. So I always say you guys are the lifeblood of everything we do here at the podcast. So appreciate you guys being you, supporting the channel, and just, again, making it so that this is always fun every single week because you guys always bring the best questions and it's always the best conversation. So thank you so much for being here. Let's start right away. Randy, really appreciate the super chat. Thanks so much for doing that. In the heat of the moment, Mosby let his teammates scoop up the ball. Then he finished a block at the goal line instead of celebrating. Does that show you what this guy's about when the chips are down? Yeah, I definitely think, that shows what he's about. And I think it was just one of the coolest plays of the entire offseason / preseason. You get to the point in the season where all of these players have an opportunity to kind of make a name for themselves. You want to see who's going to step up. I thought a lot of players did step up in that last game. A couple of them, didn't get retained. Guys like Christian Welch, Anthony Johnson Jr., etc. But all you can do is go out there and put your best foot forward. And that's exactly what Aaron Mosby did, not only on the forced fumble, but then I thought, like you said, the heads up play to kind of just let the faster guy who got there first and Anthony Johnson Jr. pick it up and go to the end zone. And then look what he could do to help Johnson on his way to the end zone. Didn't get selfish on the play. Then dropping into coverage, having the interception was just all around a really good final game for him. And just what he's able to do on special teams, his unselfishness, I think that tells you the story of why he is on this roster right now. And, understandably so. I thought they would go potentially with 4 defensive ends, but we knew that they had 2 talented pieces there in both Aaron Mosby and Brenton Cox, who could easily be considered for a 5th or in this case, even a 6th spot. They clearly felt really good about those 2 players and their development moving forward. We'll see how much they get active on game days with the other 4 defensive ends. Teams is going to play a huge part in that. Specifically, I think Mosby might have a chance there a little bit more because of some of the versatility and special team stuff that he can do. But overall, really cool moment for him. Awesome game and deservedly on the 53-man roster, at least for now. We always know those things can change in a moment's notice, but cool story for Aaron Mosby and definitely deserving of that roster spot. John, if I had to pick a top 5 most irreplaceable players on the team, love Tom, Gary, Jair, and Elton. Love, yes. Tom, yes. Gary, yes. Jair, yes. Trying to think if there's anyone else that kind of fits that. Elton is probably in a close conversation. I would probably, I'm just going through these in my head really quick. Probably not linebacker corner. I would probably give the Elton spot to either Xavier McKinney or probably Kenny Clark, as I'm just kind of, again, going through it in my mind a little bit here. I would probably give that to Kenny. I would probably do like Kenny and then McKinney, and then I would probably go with Elton. That's not to say that Elton's not super important. I do feel a little confident that they could probably get by with Jordan Morgan and Sean Ryan at guards for the time being, with Tom and Walker at tackle and Myers at center. It would certainly hurt their depth quite a bit, but I think they can probably get through with that. McKinney, I think, is going to be so important to the defense, just a massively important player. And I know that you can fill those spots with Evan Williams and Javon Bullard, 2 players we're all extremely excited about, but going with 2 rookie safeties could have its downfalls as well. And I think McKinney's experience and communication back there is just going to be irreplaceable. And then Kenny Clark, I know he's getting it a little bit more up there in age and isn't quite the dominant player he once was, but I say all the time, this defense usually goes as Kenny goes. If Kenny is going well, plugging everything up in the middle, being a dominant run defender, collapsing the pocket with brute strength, things are usually going well for this Packers defense. So I agree with the first 4, love Tom, Gary, and Jair. And then number 5 would probably be between Kenny Clark or Xavier McKinney. And then I would probably put Elton more towards that like number 7 spot, but good list either way. Jerry is a proud owner of a Sam Shields jersey. I appreciate your comment about changing Valentine jersey to 24. Then I recalled another defensive back who wore 24. Willie Wood is another great DB for him to copy. Yes, Joey Thomas is not a great number 24 for him to copy. But there are, Willie Wood obviously is a great one. And like numbers things for me, I know people get really worked up about this. I genuinely really don't care all that much. Go wear whatever number that you want. I know there's some people that like, you got to go in this range for certain players. And for me, it's mostly like, whatever, just go out and play awesome football, and I could care less. I did think 37 fit Valentine very well, but we'll see what he does at number 24. And like I said, ultimately it doesn't matter much, but yeah, hopefully he can go and have a Willie Wood career. I would certainly take that. Alex, sorry that you weren't able to make it, but love the question. If Lloyd is cleared for week 1, what do you think the running back rotation will look like against Philly? If Lloyd is cleared and he's capable of playing, I think that he is the number 3 back and that you maybe get a handful of plays of Lloyd in the game. I think Wilson would be the 2. Jacobs would be the 1. I think it's probably just a little bit too much to expect him to come in and even be that number 2 running back in the game. So I would expect Jacobs to get a big workload in that game, probably 70, I'll say 70%. I would expect Wilson to get about 25%, and maybe Lloyd gets in for about 5%. That's kind of what I would expect. I don't think it's impossible that if he gets ready sooner rather than later, that he could maybe work himself into a little bit more of a role. But he was the only player that did not practice yesterday, at least was the one that was not working out with the team to begin with. And that would lend me to believe it's probably still a bit of a work in progress for him, that it's maybe, going to be individual work either later this week or next week. And then it's probably going to be a bit maybe before he gets into the team stuff. So even if he is healthy, and let's just say that, like, let's say even he practices today and is good to, like, he does team and everything, I still think Emmanuel Wilson is a year plus into this offense, probably a little bit better at pass protection, and is probably just going to be relied upon a little bit more, and has had the entire offseason at his disposal, has played a lot in preseason, where Marshawn Lloyd has just been, unable to get on the field and really start getting ingrained in this offense. So my expectation would be that going into this game, regardless of where Lloyd's health is between now and that Eagles game, I think Emmanuel Wilson ends up being your number 2 back going into that game. And like I said, if he's healthy and if he's active, which are 2 major ifs at this point, maybe he gets a handful of plays in that game. Baby QB, thanks for being here. I hope coach is enthusiastic with the new kicker. Poor guy coming into a stressful environment needs support. I worry coach wasn't more enthusiastic in the presser, and that could signal mistrust. I took it more as LaFleur just being like, it is what it is, and just kind of having fun in the media session. I didn't take it as like he was concerned or anything like that. He did say that he will, potentially alter the play calls a little bit, depending, or the, how he goes for it on 4th downs and things like that, dependent upon this situation. He's going to get the opportunity to see Narveson kick in practice and see what he's capable of and see if there's that level of trust there. But Narveson is coming into a great spot. He's going to a great team. There was no guarantee that he was going to make any 53-man roster. He could have easily been, or even a practice squad. There's not many kickers who make practice squads. So, he could have been done kicking in preseason and just been done for the year until somebody maybe gives him a call at some point. Instead, he gets to be the kicker for a team that's legitimately competing for hopefully a championship opportunity this year. So he's in a great spot. I have a feeling he will come in with confidence. He looked very confident as a member of the Tennessee Titans. I don't think he's going to have any wavering in his, abilities in any way, shape, or form. And like I said, I think LaFleur was more just a little bit more jovial, and he'll have those conversations with Narveson. He'll see what he can do in practice, and then he'll build his game plan based off of that. But I don't think there's going to be any issues there. The reason Zane Anderson made the roster over Anthony Johnson Jr. is because Brian wanted someone with Super Bowl winning experience for when we reach the Super Bowl. Goody got out here playing 4D chess. Zane Anderson doesn't have Super Bowl experience, does he? Am I missing something here? Zane Anderson. I know he was a Bill. He was a Chief first. Okay, there we go. I forgot about that. All right, so Chiefs, then Bills, then Packers. So yeah, you're right. Super Bowl champion when the Chiefs defeated. All right, there you go. All right, I like it. Some Super Bowl experience on the roster. I learned something new, Richard. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I had not remembered that he had been a member of that Kansas City Chiefs team. Mirko, first of all, thanks for all the great content every single day. Do it like the pack and keep the streak alive. Not going anywhere, Mirko. Every single day, you guys are stuck with me 365 days a year. Obviously, sometimes I might have a substitute here or there. Usually, it's only if I'm sick. Even if I'm on vacation, I'll usually record episodes in advance. But for the most part, you're going to get me 365 or 366 in a leap year. But appreciate the kind words. And like I said, I don't see the streak going anywhere. Income Options Trading, thank you so much for becoming a member. Appreciate that a ton, and I hope you're enjoying all the content, member Q&A, and make sure to get signed up for the Pick'em League as well. Any guess on how the 4 open practice squad spots will be filled? I do not. I know that Brian said that they were looking at some players from outside the organization and had come to an agreement, but haven't seen anything yet. I know Chris Russell was, reported today from, I think Easton. Is it Easton Butler? He's obviously not a media member, but he's been on top of this stuff all week long. So I'm going to trust him in this occasion. It sounds like Chris Russell is going to be one of those spots, but anything else, I don't have any sort of heads up on at this point. In your opinion, who was the most surprising addition to the 53-man roster? It's a good question. I don't think there's anyone that made it who is like, oh my God, I can't believe they made it. Everyone that made it was in, I mean, I guess other than Braden Narvison, but even him we discussed as an option, right? Everyone else that made it was on our list of people that were clearly on the bubble / within the realm of possibility to make. I think the most surprising thing to me in that realm is that both Brenton Cox and Aaron Mosby made it. You could have easily told me beforehand that Brenton Cox made it and it would have been like, yep, makes sense. You could have easily told me ahead that Aaron Mosby made it and I would have said, yep, that makes sense. Both making it is to me a surprise, just because all the things that we talked about where I even thought they may only go with 4 defensive ends is all those defensive end spots are and snaps are basically spoken for. And there's not a lot of options there. The fact that they had both of them would have lent me to believe that they probably would have gotten at least one back on the practice squad, although you never quite know for sure. But clearly they thought a lot of both of those players. I understand. I thought Cox looked unbelievable in minicamp. I didn't think he carried it over to training camp quite as well, but minicamp, he looked like an absolute stud. So you can see some of the vision there. And then Aaron Mosby, we just talked about and what he was able to do in preseason. He shows some juice. And I think one of the interesting things with Mosby is, and Goody talked about this a little bit the other day, Mosby was a player who was in between inside linebacker and outside linebacker. In fact, earlier in his career, played a little bit more of actually the inside linebacker position and never really got the opportunity to be a full-time edge rusher. This is really kind of the first opportunity that he got over a full offseason and everything to be like, hey, you're going to go be an edge rusher. And it really, and knowing that coming into this offseason so he could put on the right strength and muscle and weight and everything like that. And it really looks like he found kind of his sweet spot of the weight that he should be at and sort of the right proportions and just being able to focus on it. And it really feels like something has clicked for Mosby. So I could see why, like before, maybe you didn't see it a ton because he was kind of in between. Now he's focused on this one position. It looks better. And Green Bay, clearly feels that they have something there as well. So either of them, not surprising. Like I said, you could have easily told me that going in and I would have believed you. I think both is a surprise, but again, I understand it especially with it being a premium position and you can never have enough pass rushers. John, I am excited to see what LaFleur and Clements can do with Malik Willis, hopefully in week 18 with the number 1 seed locked up. I like the way that you are thinking, John, although I do, a little bit of me does like week 18 mattering a little bit. It always feels to me that when you go into that week 18 game on cruise control, that then the next week, especially if you have a bye, if you have cruise control week 18 and then a bye, that like it almost takes you a little bit of time in that next game to get up and going. So I wouldn't hate if week 18 they had to play for that number 1 seed and they went out and hopefully just dominated. But I would still, maybe once they're up big in that first half, Malik Willis can come in the second half and do some fun things. But I am excited as well. You can certainly see the talent there. There is zero question about that. I still don't know wholeheartedly if he's ready to be like a key backup, like meaning he can come in and again, give you that 3-3 record in a 6-game, stretch or whatever. But I do think there's a lot of excitement there. I think there's a lot of fun stuff that he can do. And the talent is undeniable. The arm is extremely live. He's got arm talent for days. He's got athletic ability for days. Now it's just, can he put the whole thing together? But I also kind of trust Matt in that situation of, hey, if you give this guy some really good looks and let him get moving on his feet, run some RPO stuff, and then allow him to sort of hit some of those seams and deep balls down the field, I think this offense works well for Willis. And I do think that, LaFleur would be able to scheme some stuff up for him. So I'd be, I don't want to say I'd be excited because I don't want to see Malik Willis get in the games at all. I would like to see Jordan Love just play the entire season, but there would certainly be a level of intrigue if we did have to, unfortunately, see Malik Willis for hopefully just a quarter, 2 quarters, whatever it might be. But yeah, I am excited to see what he can do in green and gold. How confident are you about our linebacker group week 1? Ryan, I'm glad that you asked this. And I do feel like if there is a concern hiding in plain sight, it's at linebacker. And I'm not willing to go out on the limb and be like, yeah, this is going to be really, really rough. I've really liked what I've seen in camp out of all 3 of the guys that are penciled in to be starters right now, meaning Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, and Eric Wilson. That is not something I would have expected to utter at the end of training camp, that I was excited, or at least overly impressed with a linebacker group that consisted of Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, and Eric Wilson. Yet here we are. I thought they played instinctive, aggressive, attacking football. The scheme seems to fit all three of those guys well. And I'm at least willing to give it the benefit of the doubt to say, like, hey, let's see what they can do in regular season games. But I will also say this. Quay Walker's had 2 years as kind of the number one guy where he has struggled a bit and he has not lived up to expectations. And once the lights come on, he's been okay. I don't think he's been bad. I certainly don't think he's been bad. I did think he took a step in the right direction this past year, but he certainly hasn't been what I would consider like good or even really good. I think he's been kind of fine. Isaiah McDuffie was okay as a rotational, I guess I should say like kind of emergency linebacker or somebody that can come in and give you some snaps here and there. And Eric Wilson's been a special teams guy. And now those three are likely going to see more 3 linebacker sets. You're likely going to see those 3 a decent amount. And it is potentially a concern that, again, is sort of hiding in plain sight. Like I said, I've been impressed with what they've done. I don't think that they're wrong for going into the season with those 3 as the starters. I think all 3 of them have earned it. And obviously Cooper and has been hurt basically the entirety of camp, and Hopper was hurt for a while and just kind of got back and started playing some more. And I do think down the line, we could see a infusion of Cooper and maybe Hopper into some more plays and some more packages and things like that. But I'm intrigued. I'm not nervous. I don't have anxiety over it. I'm not excited. I think it's going to be okay. But like, if you're looking at one position where you're like, we've kind of glossed over this and said, yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Is that wishful thinking? And if you kind of think back, like we do this every year, right? We see like all the good reports in camps and like things, players that are doing well, and we get excited. And then, there's going to be a weakness on the team. Some player is not going to live up to expectation, and we immediately panic, want them cut, traded, want to get them out of town. And it's never the extremes, right? It's not anywhere near as good as it probably feels and seems right now as we're going into the season. And it's probably not as bad as it's going to feel when some of these mistakes get made in season. But that's one of those positions where if you kind of really look at it and you're really keeping an open mind and saying, are we really excited about a trio of McDuffie, Wilson, and Quay? I don't know. But I'm willing, like I said, to give it the benefit of the doubt. And all 3 of them, I thought, had a very nice, especially, I'm not even going to say especially. I think all 3 of them performed very well. And Wilson and McDuffie are more the surprising ones, especially Wilson, kind of at this stage of his career, just being like, yep, I'm going to be a starting linebacker. Didn't see that coming, but he's earned it. They've all 3 of them looked good. I think Goody kept Cox and Mosby over Anthony Johnson Jr. because of the Love contract. Edges are expensive. If either guy develops, it's a huge win in future years. I will say this, John. I do think premium position plays a part in the thinking always. I think if you have the opportunity to kind of grow and develop some of those players at those premium positions, it's why Travis Glover got kept. You can make the argument it's why Mosby and Brenton Cox got kept. You can never develop enough of those sort of players. You can never have enough offensive linemen. You can never have enough pass rushers. And I can easily see that playing a part. I don't think that it gets to the extreme of like, well, Jordan Love's getting paid a ton and edge rushers are expensive and we're going to have to release Preston Smith and like we're going to have to keep. They're not thinking into next year with Aaron Mosby and Brenton Cox. That I can promise you right now, the thinking for 2025 and how they're planning for the future does not include the thoughts of Aaron Mosby and Brenton Cox. There will be bonuses like / happy surprises if they are to the point where they can replace a Preston Smith or be a key edge rusher on that team. That would be a pleasant surprise. Again, that would be sort of a bonus, but you're not planning for that. You're not like putting up your 2025 depth chart right now and crossing out Preston Smith and being like, yep, we can easily pencil Brenton Cox or Aaron Mosby into a big time role next year. So I do agree with you that premium position could easily play a part when you're making the decision between Brenton Cox and an Anthony Johnson Jr. I almost said when you're making the distinction between a Cox and a Johnson. I'm glad I did not go that aggressively in that direction and caught myself, but it was still a very funny situation. Either way, when you go with a Brenton Cox or a Aaron Mosby over an Anthony Johnson Jr., premium position definitely can play a part in that decision. Always, we're not going in that direction. All right. Is it me or does cornerback feel a little shaky? Jair and Stokes being the starters isn't bad until you consider injury history, which gives me cause to pause. After that, it feels really thin. I'll say this. I think, we probably feel, or maybe you're feeling a little bit more that way just because Carrington Valentine's been out for the entirety of camp. I think Carrington Valentine can be a legitimate starting corner in this league, and that gives you more depth than I think most teams have. Right now it's going to be Stokes, Jair, and Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. I think you also have the ability to move Javon Bullard in the slot and put Evan Williams at safety, which gives you additional depth at corner. I think, again, Carrington is a clear starting capable corner, which we saw from a season ago. And then I also think, Corey Ballantyne gives you unique depth where he can play in the slot. He can play outside, played significant snaps a season ago. These are the problems, by the way, that every single team is looking at. You get to these key positions: offensive line, pass rusher, corner, quarterback, and no team can ever have enough, and every team always wants more. So I actually think Green Bay's in a fairly decent position. Would you like to have maybe one more? And you have a Kalen King and a Robert Rochelle in the practice squad as well, who I thought could easily, either of them, could have easily made a 53-man roster. So I think they're okay right now. I don't have any major concerns. Yes, if you have injuries at any given position and Stokes and Jair go down, yeah, it's not going to feel as great. But overall, I think going into the season, this is about as much depth as you can expect at a premium position like that. Seth, hi, Andy. A bit off topic, heading out to Chicago for Packers versus Bears this year in November. Wondering if you or any of the Pack-A-Day crew will be there. Would love to talk Pack before the game. I will not be in Chicago for the game. I'm not aware of anyone from Pack-A-Day that will be there. But if I notice something, or I'll retweet it or whatever. But most of the crew does not travel for games or anything like that, like on a consistent basis. But always possible. But I'm not aware of anyone that's going to be at that game. Love Tom, Jair, McKinney, and Clark. I would be very remiss not to have Rashawn Gary in that group. I think he is by far and away their best pass rusher. You cannot have enough pass rush. He's the guy that you can rely upon most consistently. Gary would very easily be in the top 5 for me. How would you compare Valentine's training camp last year to King's this year? Happy we got him back in the practice squad, but still perplexed that they let him hit the market at all. I thought Valentine's was better last year. Here's the things that you have to sort of take into consideration here. The reason why Valentine's was better, and the reasons why they didn't let Valentine walk last year, is because Valentine's strengths were pure coverage. Like, he showed up consistently in coverage every single time. What Kalen King, and he made some big plays in camp last year as well, some pick sixes, etc. Kalen King made the splash plays, but was more inconsistent in coverage. He doesn't have that pure, just coverage ability that some of those other guys do, which makes him a bit more of a question mark as an outside corner, makes him okay as a slot corner. But at slot corner right now, you have Keyshawn Nixon, who you just gave a contract to, Javon Bullard, who we know is probably going to get some snaps in there. You have Corey Ballantyne, who can, move into the slot. And then that leaves Kalen King as kind of probably the 4th option for that spot, and not a ton of versatility elsewhere, because I don't think there's really a world in which he gets in as an outside corner. So I think that's the difference between the two. It's great that Kalen King made all those plays, but he might just be a slot corner in the NFL. I'd be lying to you if I said I knew if Kalen King was good enough on special teams or not. If he was an ace on special teams, it probably would have helped his cause to make the team. And sometimes too, GMs will take the calculated gamble / risk that they feel like they can get him back in the practice squad. And maybe he just felt like they could get him back, and they did. So right now it's no harm, no foul, and they can continue to develop him and call him up when they need to. Was it maybe a little bit of a risk? Maybe, but obviously one Green Bay was willing to take, and it ended up paying off because they got both Rochelle and Kalen King back on the practice squad. Was the missed 32-yarder and the final nail in the coffin for Anders Carlson? Goody said it wasn't. He was asked specifically about that literal question. He said it wasn't, but yeah, I guess in a theoretical, or like in a literal, case where, like, if there's really only one nail left to go, I think there were a lot of nails already in that coffin. But was it the final one? Yeah, it was probably the final one. And I think Anders knew. The head down after the kick, the not speaking to the media after the game. I think he knew. I really think he knew that was probably it, and that there was probably no coming back from that. And if it wasn't, it probably should have been, right? Like, and maybe again, they had already made up their mind by that point. But if there was any doubt, if there was any, communication between coaching staff and front office of like, who should we keep at kicker, that probably was the final, like, if anyone was still arguing for Anders, their argument just kind of went out the window, right? Like or it went wide right. There was no other opportunity for, I think, to really make an argument at that point for Anders. So in a literal sense, maybe, but I think the casket was mostly closed by that point. Do you see any other NFL team giving him a chance? Yeah, I probably at some point. And again, maybe it's a practice squad thing. Maybe it's a training camp invite next year. I would be surprised if this was just it for Anders, where he never got a chance again. You've got a young kicker who, hit 80% plus of his field goals. Kickers are constantly a issue for teams, and teams are always looking to turn it at the bottom, if you don't have a main kicker. So yeah, my guess is he gets an opportunity at some point. Might not be right away, might be midway through the season, or like I said, it might even be training camp next year. But my guess is he does get another opportunity with some team at some point. Which offensive line practice squad are you most excited about? Donovan Jennings, for sure. I will say I am excited about Lacita Smith as well. I thought he kind of quietly had a nice camp, really worked his way from anonymity to being one of the core guys on the number 2 offensive line. So was pleased that they were able to get him back. But Donovan Jennings coming out in college, I thought absolutely should have been drafted. This is one of those players that Green Bay has had so much success with in the past, taking an offensive tackle that was really successful in college, kicking them inside, and then letting them be a really good guard. I think there's something there. I think Donovan Jennings' legs basically just got cut out from under him when he was injured through almost the entirety of training camp and preseason. And they didn't play him much in that final preseason game. And I think if anything, that was to almost make sure that no other team really got much of a glimpse of him. And knowing that they were going to have to cut him, there was not going to be a way that he was going to make the 53, and just to try to make sure that they got him back on the practice squad. So that would definitely be my answer, but Lacita Smith, a worthy inclusion in there as well. I'm surprised Dillard made it after hearing the first video you made about him. So here's the thing with Dillard, and I talked about a little bit about this the other day. There's no question about it, and anyone will tell you that has watched the film. Dillard would probably tell you himself, it was a brutal year in Tennessee last year. And I mean a brutal year. He did not look like a starting offensive tackle at any point. He got benched on a few different occasions, got multiple opportunities, did not live up to it. And it was bad. It was really bad. He came into camp. They started him at right tackle, and it was also very brutal. Rashawn Gary got the best of him on numerous occasions. He did not look comfortable, did not look confident. And it looked like something that was just going to be like, well, that experiment didn't work out. They then took him from that right tackle spot, moved him back to left tackle. If you know the history with Dillard at all, he's never really wanted to be anything besides a left tackle. When they tried to move him to right tackle or at guard in Philly, he really fought it, didn't want to do it. It like left tackle is his comfort spot. And when he has tried to play guard or right tackle in the NFL, it has not gone well. So I think getting him back to that left tackle spot, getting him settled in, learning this offense a little bit more. And then I really felt from that point on, he did really have a good camp in preseason. I think he was one of PFF's highest graded pass blockers in the preseason at left tackle. And what I will say is this, and I mentioned this again prior to cutdowns, the situation with Dillard. So Travis Glover's a redshirt guy, right? So like he's not going to probably see the field if everything goes even remotely according to plan for this season. So that brings you down to 9. Then you have 2 interior players on your backup. Now Jordan Morgan might be able to rotate around a little bit, but right now he's on the interior, and Jacob Monk is on the interior. Sean Ryan, if he doesn't start and Morgan starts, then Sean Ryan would be another interior guy, right? So you've got interior guys. So then it comes down to tackle. And if you only have Kadeem Telfort then, because again, if you're considering Travis Glover as a redshirt guy, that only gives you Kadeem Telfort, who's an undrafted guy who's making a pretty significant leap up the depth chart. Do you really want to go in with just Kadeem Telfort as your backup swing tackle? And I think the thinking here is if you release an Andre Dillard, I do believe somebody else would have picked him up. Maybe not right away, but probably within the first 3-4 weeks of the season. And your odds of finding, even if he is only worthy of being your 8th or 9th or 10th best offensive lineman, the odds that you can find another offensive lineman on the open market that is as good as Andre Dillard are next to none. And even if that means he's not that good and he's a liability potentially if he gets in the game, it still is quite possibly better than the liability that would be anyone else that is on the open market. It is so insanely hard to find offensive linemen. He has experience. It's not great experience, but he has experience. He did show I think it was his 3rd year in the NFL, that he could play as a sort of rotational offensive tackle or as a swing tackle and play okay. So he's shown it. Can he get back to that? He probably is not going to play right tackle. It's probably left tackle only, but he seems to have settled in a little bit there. And I predicted Dillard for this exact reason. It's just because it is so hard to find offensive linemen at any point in the year. If you don't keep your guys now, you might not get them back, and you might be in a worse situation by not keeping them down the road. CV moving to 24. We need Marshawn Lloyd to move to 0. It is clear for whatever reason that the Packers do not want anyone wearing 0. I don't know why. But I think clearly somebody would have been 0 by now if they were okay with it, but that has not been a thing that they have seemingly been open to so far. But I would certainly be open to Marshawn Lloyd moving to number 0. When are we going to hear about the remaining practice squad guys? Any interesting names could potentially be on Goody's radar? I don't have anyone off the top of my head. Love in football. My guess is we will probably get that finalized today by the end of the day, and we'll hopefully see the remaining 3-4 guys on that practice squad filled and announced by the end of the day today, if everything goes according to plan. Techwin, a lot of talk this offseason has been about lack of offensive line depth. Does Royce getting claimed speak to Green Bay having better depth than advertised, or simply speak to the lack of depth across the league? We just talked about it, Techwin. It's absolutely a lack of depth across the league. And I think overall getting 3 guys claimed speaks to Green Bay's depth. No question about it. But this is a great example of, if you think Dillard shouldn't make a 53, well, Royce Newman just got claimed, right? So the guy that Dillard easily would have beat out, and I know they're different positions, but Dillard would have easily beat out Royce Newman. Even Royce Newman gets claimed by another team. So that's the state of the depth of offensive line in the league. Great example of it. Packers led the NFL in players claimed. We all knew the insane depth. This proves it. Yeah, and I think, even outside of the 3 that got claimed, I think Kalen King is worthy of a 53. I think, Robert Rochelle is arguably worthy of a 53. So I thought there were other players that were even out there too. And it sounds like Christian Welch got some sort of contract. It sounded like it was a 53 contract. I haven't seen any confirmation of it yet, but that could have been another guy. So there's a lot of depth and talent that Green Bay had, and it certainly showed in what other teams thought of Green Bay's talent around the league. Also, am I wrong, or is the practice squad underwhelming thus far? Seems like a few guys made it by default that I didn't think were seriously being considered 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I get the feeling of it being a little bit underwhelming, but that's going to happen when, probably 3, the primary guys that you wanted back, excuse me, Christian Welch, Grant Dubose, and Anthony Johnson Jr. all go to other teams. And, maybe Samori Toure was, I don't know if they were interested or not, but he goes to Chicago's practice squad. So when you lose some guys like that you're probably thinking are going to be the top guys on your practice squad, then the practice squad's going to look a little bit more watered down. And that's why I said claim day was going to be so important for Green Bay, because right now, if you had those players on the practice squad, how much deeper does this roster look? I'm happy for Anthony Johnson Jr. I'm happy for Royce Newman, happy for all those guys, Grant Dubose. But yeah, would have been really nice if you could have kept those guys on the practice squad. But I think that's probably why it feels a little bit maybe underwhelming. Please no quarterback intrigue. I agree, Gary. Well said. Too many question marks on our defense. Quay, Wyatt, Nixon, LVN, and the list goes on and on. Yeah, there's always 2 ways to look at it. There's a lot of really positive things too. Xavier McKinney and this new safety group looks so far improved from where they were a season ago. New defensive coordinator that looks, just say, a lot better than what we've experienced over the last, while. I think, the linebackers looked good in camp, and you still have, 2 lottery tickets in Tyron Hopper and in Edgerrin Cooper. The edge rusher group is really talented and really deep, and Rashawn Gary has looked really good all throughout camp. You've got a really deep and talented defensive tackle rotation. So there's a lot to be excited about. And again, these concerns are what the majority of teams are going through. There's no team that's got a perfect roster right now. Every fan base has some question mark / concern of what's on their roster right now. But I think overall, there's still a lot to be excited about the talent on this defense. And now it's just going out. Can they prove it week after week? And can they execute this Jeff Hafley defense the way that it needs to be executed? Every group we have is packed with players with different skill sets to run so many different schemes. And now we have the quarterback room exactly flowing the same way. Willis is completely different than Love. Dan, I really like the thought process here. And I do think versatility and options are the name of the game. Matt LaFleur has a poo-poo platter of different options at every single one of his different positions, going all the way to offensive line, tight end, wide receiver, running back, quarterback. There are a plethora of options that they can go with for whatever he needs to run a particular play, particular scheme, etc. And the same goes on the defensive side of the ball, players that have tremendous versatility, that can do different things, that can line up in different positions. And that's going to give Jeff Hafley a ton of options as well. I love how this roster is built. I think it gives you a ton of versatility, a ton of options, a ton of different scheme things that you can do, different personnel packages on both sides of the ball. And I'm really excited and think that can be one of the true strengths of this team. How surprised were you to see Royce claimed? I guess I'll say slightly, only in the fact that I do think he's really, really struggled these past few years. And I thought he had a pretty poor preseason. He had a really nice week 3 preseason though. And I think it more, again, goes to the show the lack of offensive line depth across the league. And I think that's why I wasn't more surprised, just because you get a player who's been a starter along the offensive line and is in his 4th season and has a lot of tape out there and a lot of experience. And there's going to be some form of value on that type of player. Now, it hasn't been great tape and it hasn't been great experience, but again, the offensive line depth around the league is what it is. And that's why I wasn't super surprised by it, but maybe a slight surprise. Do you think Goody tried to trade DuBose? Yeah, absolutely. And Anthony Johnson Jr. It always is amazing. Like these conversations and phone calls take place. I am sure when they traded for Malik Willis, I'm sure the first thing was, do you want Grant DuBose? Do you want Anthony Johnson Jr.? Do you want Royce Newman? Is there a player swap that we can make here? I am sure that he called other teams, maybe with players that he was interested in, to see if they could make a swap of one of these players before releasing them. And I'm sure he was also, open to moving them for future draft picks as well. And we just know this to be the case because he's traded Kadar Hallman for a pick. He's traded Cole Van Lanen for a pick. He's traded Tyler Davis for a pick. Like, he has done a phenomenal job of finding these fringe roster guys new homes and getting legitimate draft compensation out of it. So I think they made a swap of a linebacker at the end, and they went and got Corey Bojorquez. So he is very open to trading, and he would have made calls on all of his guys before cutting them to make sure there wasn't a home for them, and to see if he could not get some sort of conditional 7th round pick in return rather than absolutely being empty-handed from it. Yeah, you're welcome. Funniest moment in Pack-A-Day history. You're welcome. Thanks for the heads up on the member chat in the morning's episode. I might have missed it otherwise. You bet. Just know, always be checking the community tab in the YouTube channel, or get notifications turned on for it, because I always usually post it at least the day before. I try to post it earlier. I also post it on Twitter as well. So if you don't have Twitter notifications on, I highly recommend that, but definitely be checking the community page on the Pack-A-Day page as well, or because it's always going to be updated there. But I'll try to mention it in the episode, but just be kind of on the lookout for those sort of things. Remember, the Pick'em League is live over on the community page as well if you want to get involved in that. Speaking of Super Bowl winning experience, how has Matt Orzik looked this preseason, Richard? I have no idea. There's been some high snaps. There's been some low snaps. The last thing that you're focusing on, especially when the kicker battle is so important, is and mostly, again, based on the viewing point that we get from camp, it's impossible. It's a lot of times when Bowden was there, it was impossible to even see who the long snapper was. And even if I saw it, other than if it was really high or really low, I'm no expert on spin rates for long snappers, nor am I going to be, measuring the rotation of the ball or timing how quick it gets from center to, I have no idea. They thought enough that Bowden got released a couple times and it wasn't really a competition. There were multiple long snappers who got released on final cutdown days. So if they thought it was an issue, like they thought kicker was an issue, there were a ton of options that were out there. They didn't feel like it was an issue that they needed to address, and Orzik is back. So for now, that's good enough for me. When it confuses me how people are both worried about guys we cut being too good and being claimed and our depth being bad. Sometimes the same people talking about the same position. Yeah, I think I understand all of it, right? Like, you want to keep as many of your guys as you want. And there's always question marks about, certain spots on your roster that you have some trepidation about. So I totally understand what you're saying. And what I will say is I mostly agree with you, but there's a lot of oxygen in the space for Packers thoughts and ideas and content. And I get and understand the idea of, man, really wish we could have kept Anthony Johnson Jr., Christian Welch, Grant DuBose, etc. And also wondering of like, hey, is there enough depth along the offensive line? Is there enough depth in these certain spots? Because there's also a difference between depth and quality depth. So it could be that Green Bay has depth, but is the quality depth there? Those are all conversations as well. But Techwin, for the most part, I very much agree with you. What's the deal with Jonathan Ford? Do you think he'll be activated and added at some point? 6 defensive ends and 6 defensive tackles seems pretty heavy for the 53. I think what this does, PJ, is it gives them an option. it is very likely that if he was entirely healthy, my guess is he just would have been released and they would have done everything they could to get him back on the practice squad. That would have been my expectation. I don't think they have an open spot on the 53 right now, but he's going to be on IR to start the season at least for 4 weeks, maybe longer. And while he recovers, could there be an injury at defensive tackle that happens and all of a sudden you need to call up a defensive tackle? Yeah. And if you're looking for a position where outside of the top 5, they don't have much depth, like James Ester's the only one on the practice squad right now. And that is another position, especially like run stopping defensive tackles, that can be very hard to find in season. So if they felt like at any point he could be back, give him the leeway that he needs to recover. And then you're hoping that you never really need to put him on the 53 and you can always release him with an injury settlement later if need be. But if all of a sudden you do have an injury at defensive tackle, at least now you have an option to go to if you need that spot down the road. Cooper is a freak, but pretty raw and inexperienced, but has to get some experience. How do they get him on the field? Quarterback spy, maybe. I think certain packages. I think he can be used as a blitzer immediately, as a quarterback spy immediately. I think there's some unique things that they could try to do with him. Maybe if you're in a cover 2 and you want him being the linebacker that's screaming up the seam, trying to stick with the tight end, I think maybe you could do a little bit of that. Obviously, you don't want to get into a point where it's a tell, right? You don't want it to be where like, or Edgerrin Cooper's on the field, so we know they're not going to play man-to-man, or Edgerrin Cooper's on the field, so we know they're not going to do this. Like, you don't ever want it to be a tell, but if you can get him to do enough stuff that you're not exactly sure what it's going to entail, I think there are some certain packages and plays that you can certainly get him in for and that he can make an impact with. Anderson over Johnson, was that a special teams decision? It was. I mean, I don't think there's any real surprise there. I will say Zane had a really nice camp overall, had the 3 picks of Clifford in mini camp. And I thought he made, numerous plays. He had an interception in camp for sure. And, he was ahead of Oladapo in the last preseason game. So I think there's a solid football player there, but he's not expected to see the field. If everything goes according to plan, that is going to be Xavier McKinney and then Javon Bullard and Evan Williams, and Zane will never see the field. And I think when you look at it from a developmental standpoint, if that's what you're looking at, where if Anthony Johnson isn't ready to play right now, you have McKinney, who's not going anywhere for a while, and 3 developmental safeties, and 2 of them are ready to play right now. But Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, and Kitano Oladapo are your future safeties, right? So you don't really need another future safety. And if you're looking at it as somebody who you need to play right now, well, Anthony Johnson's not that either. Anthony Johnson was probably the 4th most ready to, safety to play right now. He was probably the 5th most, like if you're looking at it from like a future standpoint, developmental standpoint. And from a special team standpoint, it's just easily going to be Zane over Anthony Johnson Jr. I'm sure they wanted Anthony Johnson back on the practice squad. It's unfortunate for them, fortunate for Johnson that they were able to, or that he wasn't back on the, or that he got claimed by the Dolphins, I should say, but, by the Giants. But overall, I understand the decision. I would have absolutely kept Anthony Johnson Jr., so I'm not trying to speak out of both ends of my mouth here. That would have been a decision that I absolutely would have made to keep him, but I can see what they were thinking. And it's not hard to, sort of peek around and get the vision that they were seeing with how they decided to stack that safety position. I feel like sometimes people expect every player in a roster to be able to start a game in a pinch and not stand out. Depth needs to be in comparison to the league, and I think we have excellent depth. Totally agree with that, Techwin. Well said. Do you think the 53 in Brazil is Brazil finalized? Yeah, I think so. I would be surprised. I mean, I guess maybe there'd be a player that was, waived yesterday or today that maybe they think could be an upgrade somewhere and maybe could make a move. But I think this is probably the 53 that you're going to see for the Brazil game taking on the Eagles. Isn't having 2 kickers on your team uncommon? Makes me wonder if there's any chess move that they are working. It's uncommon, but I think with it being an international pathway program player, like just kind of put the uncommon to the side. And I think that a really smart way to use the international pathway program is on kickers and punters. I think that's one of the ways that program is. I know the program is new, but like one of the ways that international pathways of international players have come over and been successful is really been at kicker and punter. So I love using it for that. The odds that other positions that you can come in and learn those as easily is not, very often. So I really, again, like Charlie Smith is doing the same thing for the Saints. So Alex Hale is not like, almost put him out of your mind as like position player, like any form of depth or anything like that. He is a pathway program player that they're going to keep on the roster because they can, to see if he can develop, to see if he can compete for the spot in 2025. And if all of a sudden midway through this year, Braden Narveson is just unbelievable, and it's clear that he's going to be their kicker for the foreseeable future, it wouldn't surprise me if they released Alex Hale and brought a different international pathway program player in. They could definitely do that as well. So, but for now, just almost put it out of sight, out of mind. Don't think of it as like, well, they could have a different position instead. I think this is the right way to use it, especially with kicker being a question mark right now. So I have no problem with it whatsoever. Slobber Knocker, could we see a Telford active each week to bring in for short yardage or 6 offensive linemen? I think Telford is going to be active because he's one of the best, 8, in my opinion. It'll be between Telford and Dillard for that 8th spot. I shouldn't say that. I think it's an interesting conversation. So we know the 6, right? We know that it's going to be your starting 5 and whatever one of Sean Ryan / Jordan Morgan are not the starter. So I think it's going to be those 6 for sure. And then I think it gets a bit more interesting. I think probably, I'll say that. I think there's 2 spots for 3 guys, Dillard, Telford, and Jacob Monk. And 2 of those guys will be active. And what do you want to go with? I could see a world in which you go with Dillard and Telford, because I think Telford can play some guard in a pinch as well. So that would give me, and if you need a left tackle, you would probably go Dillard. If you need a right tackle, it's probably Telford. And again, if it's an interior offensive lineman, it's going to be whoever, isn't starting. It's going to be Jordan Morgan. And then you can move Zach Tom inside if you need. You can move Elton Jenkins around. You can do a variety of different things. So I could see a world in which, especially because Sean Ryan can play center, Zach Tom can play center, Elton Jenkins can play center. Like, you just have so much versatility there. So it wouldn't shock me if it was, your final 2, because again, we know the 6. If your final 2 were Telford and Dillard, wouldn't shock me if it was Dillard and Monk. Wouldn't shock me if it was Telford and Monk. So I think you have 2 spots for 3 players, and none of those 2 would surprise me. So take your pick of whatever 2 you want best out of Dillard, Telford, and Monk. I think Monk and Telford give you the most versatility. It just depends on how strongly they feel about Dillard and if he's really their swing tackle or if it's Telford. But I would probably go with Telford and Monk if I'm being honest. Feel better if Joseph stuck around somehow. I don't know why. Angry casual fan. He had a really bad camp, was under 80%, has been really poor at the end of camp, and to me was never a real legitimate option. So keep throwing darts until you find something that sticks. And I would have 1,000,000% rather gone with Narveson than Greg Joseph. Joseph was nothing else. He was clutch. I don't know. I just don't see it. I would not have gone with Greg Joseph. I almost would have rather, I don't know. I would have definitely rather even gone with Anders than Greg Joseph, to be honest. So, I don't see it. I would not have gone with Greg Joseph in any capacity. And I would have taken Charlie Smith. I would have taken Narveson. I would have taken Austin Seibert. There probably would have been 3 or 4 kickers. I would have probably brought in Randy Bullock. I would have brought in Riley Patterson. I could think of probably at least 5 or 6 kickers that I would have gone with before I would have just stuck with Anders Carlson or Greg Joseph, to be honest. So don't agree with that one, but to each their own. If you've got a Greg Joseph, desire to be on the team, that's your thing. I will let you have that as your thing. All right. I think that's it for now. I think that's all the questions. We went through 48 minutes, had a lot of really fun questions. So appreciate you guys a ton. I will be back for happy hour tomorrow, 4 p.m. Central Time. So make sure to check that out. Appreciate you all so much for being members. I'll see you before you know it. Tomorrow will be episode with Perry Goldstein. So looking forward to that. We're going to be talking about sort of some off-season awards, all the things that happened from the beginning of the off-season until now, and sort of our award winners and biggest storylines and everything like that have happened. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I already got my notes ready, and I think there's going to be a ton of really fun stuff to talk about. So I will see you guys all soon. Thank you for being you. Appreciate you a ton. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.